This is more Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to give you my take on buying new cars versus buying used cars. Now first, I want to start by saying this question came from you, and if you have a question for me, email me at moredougdemuro@gmail.com, and I read through the questions, and if there are a couple about one topic, or if there's a question I especially want to answer, I might answer it here on More Doug DeMuro. Now with that in mind, I want to talk about, new cars. Should you buy a new car or should you buy a used car? Which is best for which circumstance, whatever. There are two main groups that always suggest buying a used car, or primarily suggest. And that's people who are personal finance obsessed, people obsessed with budgeting and being thrifty and all that. And then there's also car enthusiasts, most car enthusiasts, not all, generally say buy used cars. This is the only thing that car enthusiasts and personal finance people tend to agree on, which is you should buy used cars. But they have very different reasons for it, obviously. And in both cases, their reasoning is pretty sound and pretty rational, but I think that they both miss some nuance. I generally support buying used cars, but there are some reasons why I think people should buy new cars, and I'm going to cover that. And I want to start by addressing the reasoning of the personal finance people. The biggest reason that people who are really into personal finance and budgeting, they say you should buy used cars is obviously because they're cheaper. They're cheaper to buy, save money compared to a new car, which is just going to depreciate and lose a lot of value. And if you just buy a used car, you will save a ton of money, and it's the smart financial thing to do. That's what budgeting personal finance types say. The problem to me is the nuance that they miss is that they don't take into account safety features and advancements in the last years, decades. I can't tell you how many personal finance people have come to me and said, oh, I drive a 94 Corolla and I bought it in 2008 for $2,600 and I haven't spent anything on it and I'm way ahead. I'm so much smarter than you with all your cars. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true until you're dead. Because the thing about older cars like that is safety technology has just improved so dramatically over the years. When I was a kid, car safety advancements, they were pretty slow. You had 3-point belts, then you had like airbags, and that was a big deal, but then nothing happened for a few years. And then you had anti-lock brakes, and then nothing happened for a few years, and then you had side airbags. And it took a while for this stuff to trickle down, frankly. Now, safety technology is moving at an unbelievably rapid pace. And so you have 360-degree cameras, you have blind spot monitoring, forward collision, automatic braking, rear cross traffic alert, you get cameras all over the car, and then you also have the earlier stuff, which has now trickled down to basically everything, stability control, anti-lock brakes. Safety has improved an unbelievable, just crumple zones in engineering has come a long way in 25 years. I drive my 97 Land Rover Defender, which admittedly has its roots in the 60s, but yeah, I drive that around. I don't feel safe. That thing feels scary. But back in 97, people were buying those, rich people were buying those for like their high school kids. And I would never let my high school kid drive that car now. It's so far from a reality. When it came time recently for my wife to get a car, I think it'd be cool if my wife was driving around in a Lincoln Blackwood. That would be so cool. But my wife doesn't care that much about coolness, so the Lincoln Blackwood idea was not accepted, and she got a new car. And that's because her primary motivation was safety. It was all these technologies and features, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, all this stuff that older cars don't have. Now, car enthusiasts will say, well, that stuff just makes you a worse driver. It's more stuff to break. Well, fine, but if it keeps you alive, if it keeps your high school kid alive, your wife, your father, your grandfather, isn't it worth it? I get personal finance people who are like, well, I bought a 3 or 4-year-old car to save money. Fine. But people who are bragging about having that 94 Corolla, I really hope you don't get hit by an Escalade in one of those. And I mean it. The other thing I think that personal finance type people don't take into account is there are people who are enthusiasts. People want to enjoy life. I've had also so many personal finance types say to me, oh, I'm going to retire at 50. Yeah. But then they do, and they got all this money socked away, but they're bored because they haven't pursued any hobbies throughout their lives because they haven't spent any money on anything. And life is all about priorities. And so if you're looking at a Focus ST, versus a Focus SE, like a base model, and it's $8,000 more for the ST, if you can swing it, do it. Go to car meets, go to meetups, go on drives with your friends or meet people that way. Have a life. And I think a lot of these people neglect to think that. Now, I'm not saying go out and buy an M6 Grand Coupe where you're going to lose $50,000 in depreciation in half an hour. But I do think that, within reason, if you can afford it, I think the idea of buying a newer car is a rational thing that people should do if cars are a priority. Just like for some people, fine wine is a priority or nice clothes. Obviously, I don't care about that, so I don't spend money on clothes. But I do spend money on cars because that's a priority, and I think it's important to live life while you're young and not just sort of hoard money because you want to retire 5 years early. That's just my take, and that's where I think the personal finance types go wrong when they tell you to only buy used cars. Now, the other people who tell you to only buy used cars are the car enthusiasts, and their primary rationale is new cars lose so much value, and there are so many cool used cars. Just buy a used car, save a ton of money, and it'll be great. Yay! And there is some good reasoning there. New cars do lose a lot of value. You can often have similar experiences in used cars and save a lot of money. But I think that this is a good example of a situation in which car enthusiasts have a perspective problem. And I think car enthusiasts often have a perspective problem when it comes to buying decisions. Car enthusiasts don't understand, how could someone buy a Prius? Well, not everybody's into cars. How could someone buy a Lexus RX? Some people just want a comfortable car to drive around. Car enthusiasts often have like a blind spot when it comes to that sort of thing. And this is a good example because not everybody wants to buy a used car and then deal with potential hassles that come with it. My parents know nothing about cars. They couldn't tell a Sienna from a Malibu. And they buy new cars. And they would rather lose money to depreciation than have to deal with the potential hassles that come along with having a used car. They don't want to ever have something break and, they got to worry about how I'm going to send it to the dealer, fit a flatbed. They don't live in that world. And car enthusiasts are a lot more willing to accept those kind of things because they're into it. They can fix it themselves. They don't mind a flatbed. They know a guy at a mechanic shop who will get it fixed cheap. They can buy the parts themselves. They can do the work themselves. But people who aren't into cars, who aren't into used cars, they don't mind losing more to depreciation if it means they don't have to deal with that stuff. And I think a lot of car enthusiasts lose that perspective. There are people who don't want to get under the car on a weekend. Yeah, there are. And one thing I think that it's important to keep in mind here is this is true of just about any group of enthusiasts. If you're really handy around the house, you enjoy doing like housework and getting under the sink and fixing stuff, then you're probably more inclined to buy a fixer-upper type of house. And maybe you fix the pipes, and maybe you do the spackle and the drywall, and you do all this stuff. Now, me, I'm not into that stuff. I'm into cars. So I would rather buy a house that's, done. You don't have to worry about that stuff. And obviously, I'm going to pay more for that. Right? But I don't know or want to know really how to do a ton of stuff to a house. And that's exactly how some people feel about cars. They don't want to know how to deal with all that crap, and they would rather just pay more and not have to worry about it. And so car enthusiasts who say, oh, you're buying a new car is such a waste of money. Yeah, well, to car enthusiasts who know what to look for, it is. But not to everybody. Now, obviously, me personally, I prefer used cars. I have never bought a new car. But that's mostly because of what I just mentioned. I know what to look for. When I'm going to look at a used car, I can tell if it's making a certain noise, what's going on. I've been on the forums and I know all the potential trouble spots before I even have looked at the car. And I know, if this door card has some rust on it, then that probably means this and that. And if this noise is going on, then the Vanos is going blah, blah, blah. I know all that stuff, and so as a result, I kind of have the luxury of being able to buy a used car and to know what I'm getting into and know where it's going, so I generally do that. But even me, who's had 26 cars or whatever and kind of does know all this stuff, I still prefer used cars with a warranty. And I actually think the sweet spot is sort of the mix between new and used, which is like certified pre-owned cars. And that's kind of what I've been doing the last few years, which is buy a car that isn't new because you're going to lose so much in depreciation, but it isn't so old and used that you're going to have to just be dealing with constant breakdowns and failures. I would love a brand new E63 AMG wagon. Well, they're $130,000. So I bought a 5-year-old certified pre-owned one for $43,000. I still get a Mercedes-Benz warranty. It's still a fairly new car. So in that sense, it's like a new car, but obviously it's 70 grand cheaper than it was originally. So in that sense, it's like a used car. And to me, that's kind of the sweet spot between new and used. I would love a Volkswagen Passat W8, a Volkswagen Phaeton, but I don't want to put up with that. And so there's a sweet spot in there that if you buy a car that's a few years old, you save a little money in depreciation, but you're not subjecting yourself to all these potential hassles and problems and repairs. So that's kind of my personal take on it. It's how I buy a lot of my cars, especially my daily driver cars. Certified pre-owned or something with a warranty. CarMax bumper to bumper is kind of the way to go. But I can see why some people buy new cars. Safety technology, if safety technology hasn't trickled into used models yet, I could totally see that as a reason to buy a new car. If you're an enthusiast and you want to spend a little more because you have a little more to spend, I can also totally see that as a reason to buy a new car. And if you just don't want to deal with the problems and issues that come with a used car, I could also see that. Of course, this is all assuming that if you're buying that new car, you do have the money, that you're not crazily stretching yourself to show off to your neighbors or whatever. That stuff's just stupid. But if you got the money and you're able to prioritize it, you know, there are valid reasons to buy a new car. And I don't judge people who do that. And obviously, everybody who buys a new car, eventually those become used cars that are purchased by people like me. Anyway, so that's my take on new versus used. Thank you for watching. And remember, you can send me an email with your question, moredougdemuro@gmail.com, and I might even reply. This is More Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to give you my take on buying new cars versus buying used cars. Okay?